Hello, I speak French, but today I will speak English for the challenge and also for people who don't speak French today. So I will talk about refreshVersions. refreshVersion aims to end the dependency hell in minutes. Not all dependency hell, because it's impossible to make a program to make that. Machines are too dumb, as far as we know. We do that because nowadays, when you have a Kotlin project, a Gradle project, or whatever, you have to Google for the dependency strings and also for the versions. And we don't like that. And also note, we target only Gradle projects because Gradle allows for our work to work. We don't aim to cover everything, Maven, NPM. Gradle can already supersede NPM dependencies, Maven dependencies, so we target Gradle projects, which works for Kotlin. So why do we do it? To end dependency hell. And so what is dependency hell? So it's not a Gradle exclusivity, of course, but it can come in many forms and can come at many times, at different points in your project. When you are creating a new project, when you are adding a new feature, a new app, you will have to manage dependencies many times, also to update dependencies, or you need to add a dependency on something that requires newer version than what you are already using. So there's many times where you can have dependency hell, where you have to make sure that nothing breaks when it comes to having multiple dependencies in multiple projects or multiple modules in the same project. So in real world, it's complicated. But refreshVersion, as you can guess from the name, focuses on the versions of the dependencies. So I will focus only on the updating of the dependencies. So today, if you want to update dependencies, for each dependency, you will need to search every module. If you have a multi-module Gradle project, you will need to find which one are being updated. So you will either search the web or review possible ID warnings in every module and see, oh, AndroidX tells me that I'm using version 1.0 while there's a 1.1.0, but you are not seeing beta updates that you might want to try before the bugs make it to the release. It doesn't work if you are putting the dependencies constants in the build source, if you are using that in your projects. I was using that. So it's complicated for complicated projects. Then you will need to review the changes. This is a requirement. You have to do it manually because any dependency upgrade can mean breaking changes, new bugs. You don't really know. So this is something that we don't aim to replace. But for that, you will still need to search the web somehow, to search for the changelogs. And then you have to apply the updates. So if you have, like me, 55 modules in your Gradle project, that means that you will have to find all the build.gradle or build.gradle.kts files and apply the updates if you use one dependencies in multiple modules. So we need to review a lot of things for every dependency. So that's many manual operations. And you have to do it for every project you maintain. In my case, I saw that I would defer updating dependencies because of that. Like, I have some requirement. I have a sprint where I have to develop a new feature, and I need to do it quick so we can see what we do next. And so I have no time to do all that work to see if there's updated dependencies. Sometimes I would develop an extension that actually was already available if I just updated a dependency, but I didn't know and I didn't have the time. It was longer for me to find the updates than to develop the new feature. And I found that a bummer. So that's why I was looking for a solution. So I believe that life is too short for to Google what are the Maven coordinates, what are the strings, that life is also too short to Google the version numbers, and can I use that version, which one I'm using, is it going to break previous code, I don't know. Life is also too short to use Android Studio to update the versions. Why? Because I don't put all the strings into all my modules. I told you I have a project where I have 55 modules. I have some that are smaller, some that are bigger. that's not very relevant, but like that's many files where I just have to put the mouse over on the string to see if there's an update, but it only works if I define the string there, but since I have multiple modules, I would define the constant in build source, and this would no longer work. So either I would use Android Studio and it's cumbersome many files to open, or I would have to read where I define the dependencies and search on Google. Both are unmanageable. And also, life is too short to break Gradle incremental builds. So this issue is not happening if you just put the string dependencies. But if you use build source, every time you update the build source, it will invalidate all your Gradle builds. So if you are benefiting from Gradle incremental compilation, Kotlin incremental compilation, and all of that, it breaks every time you update the build source. So every time you update the versions, if it's defined in the build source. So that's time lost. So that would make me update less and less, like every 3 months instead of every week, or maybe less. And I will have to parse, I mean, with my eye, the Kotlin code, or Groovy code. Some people are also defining it in Groovy code. So yeah, life's too short for that. I'll show you what solution I came up with. And I will use presentation mode. Okay, so this is, wait. Actually, I tested it. I need to reverse the changes. We are going to be there in a second. Okay, so this is the project that I got from the IntelliJ template. I just created a new Kotlin JVM project where there's definitions of dependencies. So this is a root build.gradle.kts file. There's the Kotlin version defined here. There's the JUnit version defined here. And for now, that's all the dependencies that we have. So I could introduce a typo, for example. It will no longer work, but there's no error. The IDE still shows me that, oh, you have a warning there. You are using something old. You should use test implementation instead, which I'm fixing right now. So now it's telling me that it's all right, even though it's not, because I made a typo here. This is another issue, which is not about the version, but that's also an issue that refreshVersions also solves. So just to be clear, this, if I add many dependencies here, I will have a lot of versions to manage. So if you want to use refreshVersions, you need to bootstrap it. I mean, you need to enable it. It's not coming for free. So in this project, which is quite simple, we have no code yet. So this is really empty. We have this file, and we also have the settings.gradle.kts file. This file is where we will enable refreshVersions. So here, I will, of course, wait. This is where I have the browser. I will go to the refreshVersions webpage, which is here. And here I will look at how I can enable it. So I need to be on a recent Gradle version. It works only for Gradle 6. The default project is already on Gradle 6, and then I need to use a build script. So in the build script, I am too many projects open. Okay, here's the build script. So I will find on the Gradle plugin Power Cloud this dependency, which is called dependencies, but also bundles refreshVersions, because we split our project. So now I'm performing Gradle Sync. It will not work yet, but then I can enable the plugin by calling bootstrap refreshVersions and dependencies. So now it's down. I can sync the project again, and I'm good to go. I'm good to go, but I'm not able to see there's an update. To do that, I will need to migrate first these dependencies. The dependencies is JUnit and Kotlin. For that, I will open a terminal. and I will run a special task, but I might not know the name. So how I can find it? I can execute a Gradle task, and here I want to migrate to refreshVersions, dependencies, and constants. So I run that, and it doesn't work because I need to run it with console plain, otherwise there's some stuff that the IDE will break, because this is an interactive task. That means that I will be able to do it step by step into the terminal. And if you run it in the IDE, you will not see that you can put input. So that's why we require to run it from the terminal. So I'm going into the terminal, wait. I don't recall the name of the task. I run it again. This is the task. Maybe it's a good improvement to automatically copy it to the clipboard. Just saying. And here I use console plain. Okay, so here it detects that there's only a root project which is called column. So I'm looking into it, and here there's two dependencies that I can migrate. So let's go for the first one. The first one is Kotlin standard library JDK8. By the way, the version is not defined here, it's defined here. This is a special case because they have a Gradle plugin. But I don't care, I will still use the version here. So I'm copying that string, which actually is not a string, but a constant that is brought by refreshVersions. So here, I have everything from Kotlin defined, Kotlin standard lib JDK8, JDK7, JS, come on. Everything is there. So now I say that I'm done with that one. Sorry, done. And then I'm going for test implementation, and here there's a JUnit. So instead of this, I will go for testing, autocomplete to the rescue. It's testing. No, not this one. Testing, and then JUnit 4. Now I say that I'm done, so I no longer have the version here. I said that it will work in minutes, 1 minute 24. Okay. So now the version is defined in a new file that the IDE found, which is version.properties. I need to add it because otherwise my build won't work in CI. And here I just got the version that I'm using. But now I want to see if there's an update to that. So I'm going to run the task which is refreshVersions. So I'm running it, and boom, there's an update for JUnit 4. Finally, after years. To update it, I just have to do that. And so if I had a multi-module project, it will all be in that very same file, version.properties. So I can have 10 modules, 20, 40, 60, everything will be there. That way I don't have to think, oh, I am that module, this is a different version, because I forgot. Usually it's because you forgot to update it. Now everything is there, and if you want to see the update, you just have to run the task. And it's not updating, it's just showing you that there's an update, and with 2 keystrokes, you can update. So before I update, I will just perform a Gradle Sync to ensure that everything is okay. Everything seems to be okay, and now I will add a test, a dummy test, because we are not focusing on the code. Let's say that I can test anything. Okay, and here I have access to JUnit, dummy test. Let's make it fail. So JUnit here, I'm using the version which is not shown. It's not shown in presentation mode. I have to exit presentation mode. I'm sorry. You see, it's JUnit 4.12. So now I'm going to do that thing that I could do before. I'm going to run Gradle Sync again with that shortcut that I have. Coming back into the test, clicking again, and now you can see it's JUnit 4.13. So it works perfectly with the IDE because we are not really relying on the IDE, we are just working. Damn it. Yeah. I hope you can see it, that it's 4.13. We are just relying on Gradle's API to do that. Yeah. So now if I wanted to add another dependency, I will switch back to presentation mode so you can see bigger. Let's say I want to use OK-HTTP. So I will use implementation. I don't know how to type under stress. OK-HTTP is made by Square. So Square is there. Is there OK-HTTP tree? Yes, there is. I will use OK-HTTP, and in the test, I will inject one with a login interceptor. So I will use OK-HTTP with the login interceptor. I perform the Gradle Sync again. Now I'm getting back to my test file, which is here. And I will see if I can use OK-HTTP. Yes, I can. I can make a builder, and I can add an interceptor. And since I'm in test sources, I can use the login interceptor. And I am using which version? Which version am I using? The latest, of course, 4.4.0. So what happens there is that I added the constant. Presentation mode again. I add the constant, but that constant has no version defined. So how am I using 4.4.0? There's no magic. There's no magic. If I go in the version.properties file, I can see that the version 4.4.0 has been added automatically. Because I was using something with an undefined version, but that is still a version placeholder. And that's why we use the underscore to differentiate from artifacts that have their version brought by a Gradle plugin, like Kotlin, for example, or from a bill of materials, like you have in Firebase now, because they had way too many dependencies. So we are playing well with bill of materials dependencies, I mean complex features of Gradle, basically. So here, what refreshVersions tries to do, it will find what is the most recent and most stable version. What it means is that if OK-HTTP had a beta version, you would see that the beta version is available, but it will use the most stable one. So it will, if there was a stable version, it will use a stable. If there's only an alpha version, it will use the alpha version. And for that to work, you don't even have to do anything. You just add something, and as soon as you will sync Gradle, if there's nothing version.properties, it gets added with the most stable and recent version. And here, we had the idea that we remind you how to refresh the versions in the comment. So if a human happens to read it and wonder what is happening here, they know that they just have to do that and run it in the terminal. So now, if I was using, for example, version 4.4.0, I could go again in test anything and check that it's the right version. Yes, 4.4.0, I will zoom again. And now, the most important thing is running the refreshVersions task. And so when I run this version, just like JUnit, it shows me that there's an available update, and it's as simple as you already know to update it. So this works for Android projects, Gradle projects, Kotlin multi-platform projects, which was not the case at the beginning of this project, but now it does. There's really no restriction about where it works. As soon as you are using Gradle, you can use that, that plugin. And you know how to set it up now. OK. No. So how the project was born? The author is not me, is Jean-Michel Fayard, which is living in Berlin, but he's French, but also speaks English. So what happened is that he found Splitty, the project that I made, and he liked it. And he also found how I was managing dependencies, which was the old build source version where it would invalidate all my build and make me my development cycles way longer, which was no fun. But what he liked in it is how I structured the hierarchy of dependencies. For example, there will be AndroidX, lifecycle, runtime, AndroidX, lifecycle, runtime, KTX, and how it was playing nice in the IDE. So we found that, and also liked the project overall. I found his project on the internet because he communicated somewhere, and I found it, and I found it promising. It was not called refreshVersions back then, but more importantly, it was not working for my project. I was trying Kotlin multi-platform, and back then it was depending on a plugin called Gradle Versions, I think, made by someone called Mains. That plugin is quite old. It's made in Groovy, back when Kotlin was probably not even 1.0. And what it would do, it would put everything in a configuration, and that's how it would break for Kotlin multi-platform, because some dependencies cannot live in the same configuration. And then it will delegate to Gradle finding the latest release. But Gradle would do more than needed, and so it will take like 20 minutes for my project to run and fail at some point. Then I found like maybe I cannot rely on Gradle, so I rewrote that thing just using the Maven metadata XML files. We are just like XML file. We have all the versions ever published. It was faster, but it took 5 minutes. And that was still way too long to find the version, maybe quicker than me getting distracted on the web while searching for what are the latest updates, but it was still very long. And actually, while this was executing, I wanted to get distracted. So I tried to make it parallel with coroutines, and then it switched to 5 seconds. Because actually, the Maven repositories can handle many requests. And so for a project that has 55 modules and probably over 100 dependencies, even though some are encapsulating more dependencies, there's probably more than 100 dependencies in my project, and now it takes about 5 seconds to run. So then we started to exchange contributions. What you are seeing now, you saw the autocomplete in the Gradle files, and you also saw refreshVersions. So the autocomplete, before it was set to be in splitties, but now we decided that it's better to put it in refreshVersion, because splitties is a different focus. It's not about Gradle, it's about providing quality extensions, while refreshVersion is really about managing your dependencies, so that's why we decided to have that. But we made it separate. You have the refreshVersion task, and then you have the dependencies plugin that we set up, which use refreshVersion to refresh the version, but that provides the constants for you to use. So how we currently work on it, we are communicating over text chat and phone calls, mostly in French, because Jean-Michel prefers that, and maybe I also work a little quicker in French, since my mother tongue. We discuss about priorities, about user and developer experience, because we want setup to be easy, and we are very thankful for Gradle 6 that makes the setup really easy. Before, you would have to set it up in all the projects, or to set it up with build source, which means that you have to set up build source if we are not using it. But now you just have to touch the settings of Gradle.kt file. And we also wanted to make it easy if you use a new dependency with no version defined yet, to automatically add the most stable and recent version that we found. And all of these things, we discussed that over the phone and sometime over chat. So that's how we are currently working on that open source project. And we also do some pull request reviewing. And sometimes, or often, Jean-Michel tells me, this is really great, you should have more tests. We have tests, not the perfect way, but we do have integration tests. What we lack is unit tests. So there's some logic that we know it works, but it would be better to make it a little independent from Gradle, so we could just test that the logic, which is not really business, but for example, the file writing logic works properly. So we are working on this, but it already works really fine. I use it in many projects. So how it works, just a summary. So the Kotlin standard library came in handy on this project because there's multiple modules in the project. There's multiple configurations in these projects, but you have dependencies that you will find in many configurations. So Kotlin enabled, for example, with extensions like distinct, with sequences, with lists, to make it really easy to work with that and to end up with what we have to process, and to not search twice for the same dependencies and overload the dependency servers. Coroutines, as I told you, make parallelization a breeze that allows us to parallelize all the requests for the dependencies versions that are available, and it's limited. We can still limit the number of parallel requests. For now, it's 64, but if we find that there's an issue running 64 at the same time, at most 64, then we can make it quite easy to control how much parallelization we can have. Also, we are using Gradle to work with complex projects, multi-modules, special configurations. We support all of that, thanks to Gradle infrastructure. And we run GitHub Actions to have builds, to have tests, to have publications as well. So it's not working on our machines. I mean, we use it when we are iterating, but then the official releases, all of this is made on GitHub Actions, and the test make sure that we are not breaking things. And we had failing tests on GitHub Actions, and we are very thankful for it to be available for free for open source projects. So yeah, I'll show a little of things because I'm pretty sure that, I mean, who ever developed a Gradle plugin there? No one. Who ever thought about making a Gradle plugin? 4 hands? Okay. So who didn't dare to think about making a Gradle plugin because it seems complicated? Half a hand, 2 hands, okay. Here I'm in refreshVersions itself. And so to make a Gradle plugin, there's a little boilerplate that is really well documented on the Gradle website. So you have to set up a few things to say what is the name of your Gradle plugin, a short description so it shows up nicely on the Gradle plugin portal where you can search what are the available plugins. And then the entry point of your plugin is simply a plugin subclass. So it's pretty similar to Android activities, for example, but simpler because you don't have to think about onCreate, onDestroy, life cycles, which are not the most complicated thing on earth, but it's way simpler. You just have to apply the plugin and that's it. So this is the entry point of our plugin, even though you are not using this when you are configuring it. And here we register the refreshVersion task. And so the refreshVersion task is just this class, and then we have a task action, and then we just run whatever we want. So if we want to just print hello, we can do it. So this is how we are getting all the projects in the task when we run refreshVersions. We get it as a sequence. We also take the build script dependencies. Then we filter to have only the Maven artifact. We get the repositories, I mean. And so you see that here we use Kotlin standard library a lot. And that avoids to have more complicated code. Of course, I'm more familiar with that code. But it's less than 10 lines of code to get all the repositories everywhere. No need to have a mutable list where I add the things and I need to track, okay, this mutable list is used where. I know that the repositories are coming from all the projects and I do whatever filtering logic. And also I use a distinct to not have duplicates, which allows to not search multiple times. So here that came really handy. And then here I started to use coroutines. So here, that's why I'm going to search for the dependencies version candidates. These version candidates, when I demoed refreshVersions, you saw only stable versions, but actually refreshVersion was also with beta alpha versions, all at the same time. That means that if you are using, for example, version 1.0 of something, and there's a 1.1.0 available, but also 1.2 alpha, and also a beta, then it will find all the stability levels, and only the ones that are newer than what you are using will be shown. I edit my example. I said, so 1.0 stable, 1.1 stable available. then an available beta in 1.2, and an available alpha in 1.3. You will see all of them. But the 1.2 alpha, you will not see it because there's a beta now. But if you want to update, it's really, really safer to yourself go to look at the changes in all the versions. But we are showing what is the latest. Then it's your responsibility to see if it will break, if it add new features, it will remove features. This is still your responsibility. So here, that's where I'm getting the list of the module identifiers, which is the Maven coordinates, with the current version that we are using, which should never change unless you are doing it manually, and the version candidates, which is a list. As you can see, run blocking, this is coming from coroutines. It allows to run suspending functions into a blocking function. Gradle doesn't have suspending functions in its API, but it still allows cancellation of a task. So let's say you are running this task while you are on the train, like me this morning. If you are in the train and then you realize that it's way too long to search for all the dependencies, if you cancel the task, it will cancel refreshVersions, because when you cancel a task, it will interrupt the thread. And when the thread is interrupted, run blocking will detect it. As you can see here, if the blocked thread is interrupted, then run blocking will also throw the interrupted exceptions. And it will throw as soon as it cancels what is happening inside. And so what is happening inside is that here we are asynchronously for all of the dependencies. We are asynchronously getting the version candidates. So it happens with this function, where I pass all the repositories, the group, the name, and the version that we have now. I construct with all of these the results. I construct an object that will have the module, the version, and the version candidate that we just got here. And then I put that into the list. It's all happening asynchronously, and I await it all. And when I await it all, then I just get a list. So here it's a list of the dependencies with the version candidates. And then I update the version.properties file. I mean, the machine is doing it. And that's all. One thing to note is that refreshVersions currently works only when you have the version placeholder, so that is the underscore that you saw. I'll come back to the new Kotlin project example that I had. So, for example, if I have this, refreshVersions will not work on it. I have to migrate that dependency. But if you don't want to replace it with a constant, you can just use the underscore instead, which is a convention that no one uses except refreshVersions, and that will make it work. That will make it work with refreshVersions. There's another thing. The Maven coordinates of OKHTTP are quite long. Yet, when we went to version.properties, you saw that we just have OKHTTP 3. So this will not work for Kotlin-X coroutines, but it will work because we did something. And this is the perfect time to add the dependencies on coroutines. Let's start. So coroutines are from Kotlin-X. So Kotlin-X coroutines. Here I will use core, which by default is for JVM. I'm running Gradle Sync. Down, and here I have Kotlin-X coroutines. So in the case of OKHTTP, which is made by Square, Square did the thing really nice. They are always using the same version for the same Maven group. So you have com.squareup.okhttp3. It's always the same version for any artifact, like the logging interceptor, the main library. Everything is on the same version. But when it comes to Kotlin-X or AndroidX, it's not the same. Kotlin-X is not very complicated. Kotlin-X, you have Kotlin-X in the group, and then you see if it's Kotlin-X coroutines, Kotlin-X serializations, Kotlin-X collections immutable, or whatever. But it's in the name part, and serialization doesn't have the same version as coroutines. So to work around that issue that we didn't have a standard for these have the same versions, except apart from Maven bill of materials and Gradle platforms, which you might not know about, but is used by Firebase in experimental way, but still works. What we are doing, so here it's in the dependencies project, where there's all the consent defined. For example, if I search for Kotlin X, this is where it's all defined. And I'm pretty sure we are missing some stuff there, but what is there is all right. So here is the rules that we are using to have the proper key for the version, to not have something that is too complex to see. Like if you have a very complex version key, when you will search on Google, you will have to manually remove the irrelevant parts. But you know, when you are searching about OKHTTP, you just type OKHTTP into Google, then you can go on the website, find the changelog, and you're done. So we want to keep the version.properties very readable, because this is where the only place where you should, where you can control the versions, except if you are keeping some hard-coded dependencies versions on purpose. But we want to keep it really readable, so you can do it often without feeling like, oh, this is complicated for me. So when it comes to Kotlin X, for example, what we have here is a rule that says for every artifact that starts with org.jetbrains.kotlinx and has a name that is Kotlinx and then a word. The three question marks mean a word. Like it can be coroutines, serialization, anything that is not a dash, that is not stopped by a dash. And then we can also have an optional part here that is a suffix with a dash. This is a custom syntax. We keep it very limited. We believe that it's more readable than regex. And so that's why I think you saw all of what we provide. There's a star, there's the optional suffix with a dash, there's the three question marks, and that's all we provide. And then below, you will see, you will say, okay, we are the relevant parts here. It's just Kotlin X. We also want a point here to separate the other relevant part, which is a word. And so here, if in place of the three question marks we have coroutines, then it will pick up the coroutines words. But there was a more complicated artifact that has two dashes, and we need to keep the other part because Kotlin X collections might be different than Kotlin X collections immutable. So this is making the work a little harder, but these rules, you can define your own. And so all you have to do is to put a file somewhere in your project, and then when you are doing the bootstrap of the project, so this is a sample project that I started with. Here is where we set it up. As you can see, there's an optional parameter, which is extra artifacts version key rules. It's just a list of strings, so if you want to use it, what you would have to do is to get a file, removing caps lock, you will get a file, and here you will say my artifact version rules the text, or you can even name it however you want, .my extension if you want, and then you need to read test, and that's where Kotlin comes in really handy. And of course, since we allow for multiple files, you need to put it in the list. And so if that file exists, then I can define my own rules. So if you have a company-owned artifact that have special version synchronization rules, then you can define your own rule that way. But here I'm removing it because we don't need it. Okay. So this is what we have today. It took us a lot of weeks to get there. And I didn't say a word about it, but before I came to work on it, because I rewrote most of the plugin in collaboration with Jean-Michel and discussing about how we would be doing it. Before, he did something that would generate the dependencies constant with their versions. So that was the first version of the project, but then we found that it would invalidate the whole build because it would edit the build source, which means that Gradle no longer knows what could happen, so not able to rely on cache. So that's been a lot of trial and error, but now we are confident that it can work on many projects. So if you struggle to manage dependencies versions, please just to let us know that this is useful to you. Drop us a star. That's still nice to know that we are not doing that and it's not useful, even though we are benefiting from using it ourselves. If you encounter any issues, please tell us. And if it works, you can also tell. You don't have, but you can. But if there's an issue, we really want to make it work well for all the developers that are using Gradle, Android developers, and about AndroidX. AndroidX, there's while writing the file, I need to show you in the dependencies thing. That's been a lot of work with AndroidX because they have a lot of inconsistencies, but there's 446 lines of code just to define dependencies constant. That's everything that you can have from AndroidX today, but like in 1 month maybe there will be yet another artifact. And there's 70 families that have different versions. So if you want to keep track of what is the latest AndroidX just in your head and keep track of what you are using in that and that project, I don't think that's possible. So that's why we think that it can really help developers, especially on Android. Right now we are working on improving refreshVersions and dependencies even further, even though you can already use it. Also, you want to improve documentation and onboarding, because you can make something really good, but if it's not properly documented, people will not know how to use it, and that's too much time to figure out everything without documentation. And then aside from that, we are also planning to work on AndroidX migration to make it quick, easy, and safe, because apart from updating dependencies, there's also that AndroidX thing that doesn't work well in the IDE, and that will put the latest whatever version AndroidX version is, like alpha versions, why you just wanted to migrate from a support library. We made a solution that works as a script that is not easy to apply to all the projects, but we started to make something that can work on more projects. And we also wanted to have refreshVersions ready to allow you to update on the further AndroidX versions easier. So that is in our plan. Also, a plugin to find most common issues in Android and Gradle project. For example, those magic Gradle properties that you can find. And that's something that with just Gradle APIs we can find. So we're also planning on that. Also, I personally plan to work on Splitties 3.0 stable that has been like alpha for over a year, I think. I got delayed by multiple stuff, including experiments with Kotlin multi-platform, and before, because AndroidX would take so much time to be ready, and also better slice look, because it's not very eye candy, I'm sorry. So thanks you for your attention. Questions are welcome. You can find refreshVersions on GitHub. You can open issues. You can also talk to us directly on Kotlin Slack. And there's a link on the README of the refreshVersions directly to the appropriate channel. We speak French. And that's it. Thanks for Talking.Kt for allowing me there.
Thank you for the talk. I was wondering if you considered having this work with Dependabot so that we could have automated pull requests when new versions are available?
So we don't plan on maintaining something like that, but there's one of our early adopters in the project that started to work on something like that, but then we made a lot of changes in how it was working. We added manual handcraft dependencies constant. So right now there's nothing like that, but there's something that we hope that the community can make, and we believe that this early adopter will really make it. If you want, come ask, I will link you the issue about that. But that's something that can be done, definitely.
Sounds good, thanks.
Thank you very much for your talk. The question is quite personal. How do you find the time to do all this stuff?
Updating dependencies, it's something that I had to do at work. there was an issue. It's funny sometimes how small blockers make you put a lot of effort into a solution. The first thing that made me work on that was that I had to update many AndroidX dependencies, and I didn't feel like I already had that file that you just saw, but instead of having underscores everywhere, it will have all the versions everywhere. So I'll have to find all the versions for all of these, and some would have the same version, some would not. So it was really unmanageable to do that on the long term. So like I need to find a better solution, and the plugin from Jean-Michel back then was not working. Actually, in mind, I had in mind to make a fork and make it work, but then he was like, oh, your project is cool, I want to contribute, and you can also contribute on mine, so finally I'm working on his own project without any fork. So I wanted to upgrade to Android 10, but there's some old AndroidX dependencies that will not work on Android 10, so I had to upgrade AndroidX to be able to Android 10, so my app would not break on Android 10, because I really needed to target Android 10. I really needed to be to the latest about location permission, to not have to request location in the background. And so I spent a few weeks at work to work on that project, but I also spent some time on my personal time. I think it's something complicated in our industry because there's some projects that will really benefit much more being open source because you can have it can become more stable with more use cases. If you keep it internal to your company, that's also way more code to maintain. That's what I'm seeing with Kotlin. I'm making so many extensions, and I'm like, if I copy paste that into every project in my company, that's so many code to maintain and to keep up to date with some changes in the libraries that I might be using. So that's why I'm working on Splitis, which is a lot of handcraft extensions. I don't put everything there yet. Maybe I will put it in another project that will be moving faster than Splitis in the future, but that might break if I find like this is not good quality. And Splitis, I want to keep it really good quality. But yeah, I do it part personal time, part company time, and I think I still have to figure out how I find the balance, and also with my company, how get them to accept that I spend many time on open source projects at times. But I'm really happy with the results. So I mean, if I'm asked, oh, you spend a lot of time on that, I can say, yeah, but look at the solution on the long term. Even 1 year, it's already you are already gaining money. Because I'm gaining time, and I'm not feeling like, oh no, I don't want to do that, so I take three times as much time because I'm not feeling energized by that task of finding all the versions manually or copy-pasting all these extensions. So yeah, that's how I find time.
Thank you.
That's all. Thank you.